Welcome back, folks, and thank you so much for tuning in. We have some incredible gold and silver specials going on at Miles Franklin right now, which are 1-ounce silver kangaroos for only $2.99 over spot. We also have the beautiful 1-ounce gold maples for only $60 over spot. But that's not it. I've been stacking for 11 years and we have the largest inventory that I've personally ever seen, along with the best prices. You can email me, slayer@milesfranklin.com, or call me, 330-485-6172, and I promise I will hook you up. I am not stingy, especially when it comes to my own subscribers. So with that aside, let's jump into this incredible moment that happened yesterday from our podcast featuring Andy Scheckman and Sean Kuhn. Enjoy.
And, you know, we've gotten used to silver being depressed for our lifetime, right? But it wasn't always. And are we going to get back into a future where there is true price discovery?
You raised some amazing points. First and foremost, I thank you for saying that, because you're singing my book. You just threw me a softball and try to swing as hard as I can at it. And that is that, yeah, I mean, no question, India, China, Russia, they realize that we've been suppressing it and they're standing for delivery. No one ever did that before. They are accumulating it. But you have to wonder, what about the U.S.? And you know, during the pandemic, silver eagles were as rare as hen's teeth. And when you could get them, they were priced at levels that were absolutely astronomical. Never understood it. I could buy coins from South Africa or Australia or the United Kingdom or Austria for a fraction of what I could from the U.S. Mint as one of only 27 authorized resellers. I'm high up on the food chain. I've been doing this longer than anyone for 35 years. I have connections deeper than almost everyone. And yet it didn't help me. I was still paying 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 over the price of silver to buy eagles. And I remember, you know, I listened to interviews a lot when I'm preparing for my podcasts. And I was laying in my swimming pool on a raft listening to Big Swear. He had a 3-part series with Jack Sermon. Jack Sermon is a guy that's about 75 years old, and he's been there since day one at the U.S. Mint. He's developed the Silver Eagle program. And I almost fell off the raft when he said that he was told by his superior. So who's his superior? It would be Janet Yellen, the head of the Treasury, to only produce as many silver eagles as the littlest amount he could without creating a revolt by the public. He said this, the guy that runs the Silver Eagle program at the Mint. He was pissed off. He's been there since day one. He was angry that this was happening. And then he went on to say, look, you know, and I'll bear in mind when the Mint was founded in 1986, the charter that is that was written into law says we must produce as many silver eagles as is demanded by the public. Well, Janet just said, produce as few as you possibly can without creating them, coming with pitchforks and knives at the front door. So, and then he says, and you know, I used to be on the other side of the table. I wasn't a primary distributor. I worked for one of the big houses, and I know how they operate. And he said they came to me at the second half of the year. This would have been 2022, I think. And he said, well, they asked us for 36 more million. We gave them 12. So why would the U.S. Mint, and what is basically the only profitable part of the U.S. government, the Mint, why would they ration the amount of silver? That are they accumulating it? Do they realize that this is a problem? But one other thing that you said, I've talked a lot about lately, and that is revaluing. Over my shoulder, Roosevelt did that in 33, confiscated gold, and then he revalued it by 40% by devaluing the dollar. The head of the Dutch National Bank has said the exact same thing for quite some time. He says, and ironically, you know something, man? Gold is held on every central bank balance sheet in an account ironically called the gold revaluation account. That's the name of it. Ironically, you can't make it up. He says we got all this money, about 20 billion euro in gold, valued at $35 an ounce. For whatever reason, the gold in Europe is still valued at the Bretton Woods price of $35 an ounce all throughout Europe on their balance sheet. In the US, it's 42.22. They must have valued it somewhere around 73 or 4, whatever year they did it, 42.22. So he said we should revalue the gold on our balance sheet to offset our liabilities. And to your point, you know, it's not just the Dutch National Bank. It's not just history with Roosevelt. Cynthia Lummis, the senator from Wyoming, just said the same thing. Trump gets up on the stage at the Bitcoin meeting in Tennessee and says, we need to create a strategic Bitcoin account, help pay down the debt. Cynthia Lummis says, I'm going to float a bill to revalue the gold that is held by the Fed on behalf of the Treasury and use the proceeds of this revalued gold to buy the Bitcoin. So I guess what I'm simply saying is, yes, I think gold will be revalued, and gold is tier one, and they're all accumulating at the central banks. I think they all understand this. And if you look at a historical connection between gold and silver, which is not tier one silver, but strategic, not industrial. Look at how these countries are copiously accumulating it. It's needed. And if you realize that there is a 90% correlation in movement since the beginning of time between the two, I don't care how high gold goes, and I think it will go higher than anyone thinks possible, and quite likely through a revaluation, whether it be by the West and the IMF or the BRICS and the BRICS New Development Bank, it's going to happen. I do believe that. But there's no other reason that the BIS would have reclassified it the world's only other tier one asset, coupled with insane acquisition, most of it opaque, and then repatriation, as we've seen over the past year and a half. Over 40 central banks brought their gold home from the New York Fed and the Bank of England. Give us our gold, we want to hold it ourselves. I do believe that they do notice this. And I think the number is $130,000 or thereabouts, and it would offset our tremendous liability with an asset and make us completely and totally solvent. Will they go that high? Who knows? I mean, we live in a world where people think Bitcoin can be $1 million. Why can't gold be 130,000? Why can't silver be 5,000 or higher? Who knows? I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's not that much more crazy than when I started in this industry and the Dow Jones was 2,100 in 1989 to see it go to 40,000. The first guy that I listened to at a conference in Las Vegas, I was 20 years old, and I was there with my dad, and I'll never forget, the guy was booed off the stage and laughed and swearing at him when he said the Dow would go to 10,000. The one thing I have learned, Sean and Jay, and that is that over 35 years of business in finance, there's one absolute and only one that I can tell you unequivocally. Bull markets go higher than anyone ever thinks possible. And back then, the Japanese Nikkei was nearly 40,000. They owned Rockefeller Center, Pebble Beach. They made anything with a motherboard or an engine way better than we did. And here we are, 35 years later. It touched where it was back then for a second. It's still below where it was. It's lost at 1.75% of its value. Bear markets fall further than anyone ever thinks possible, and it's taken an entire generation just to even get close to where it was in 1989. And I would tell you, I do believe in a world of diminishing choices and a more stark reality to the indiscretions of brain dead monetary policy and irresponsible fiscal policy, that they notice we can inflate, we can default. I've been talking about finding a villain, incentivizing Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC to dump dollars, to sign an executive order to go green, to weaponize the dollar, to destabilize the inside of this country, to make them dump dollars and say it was their fault, they did it, to reset the system. But option number 4 may be the least painful of all. Yes, it would create massive inflation, but to your point, you revalue gold, which is held in the revaluation account, to a level high enough to offset your liabilities. And silver's $4 an ounce higher in China. That's what the price is if you can deliver it there. So what if the Fed or the Treasury said, we'll pay everyone $130,000 an ounce for all the gold they want to sell? So that is the price. So if they set it to that level, peg it to a new system to give it credibility, offset our balance sheet, the liabilities, with an asset at a certain level. And yes, I think it is possible. I think they do notice it. Cynthia Loomis noticed it. I think Trump notices it because Judy Shelton, she's the one who has come out and said, if we issue 30-year bonds, who the hell wants to buy them? We're destroying the bond market and the currency. But what if we peg it to gold and make it deliverable in gold? Now we can sell long duration treasuries and people will have confidence in it. Well, what if gold is that high? And you look at this new settlement currency that they've already approved in principle, according to Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil and the head of the new BRICS Development Bank, which we may find out about in 2 weeks, called the unit, which is 40% gold backed. 40%. That's what the Swiss used to back their currency by. Gives them 60% monetary latitude. So contrary to what people say about a gold-backed system, the naive ignorance of people saying it doesn't work, for 180 years, both the United States and the United Kingdom had zero inflation and the greatest prosperity the world has ever seen. You can have gold backed. It doesn't need to be one-to-one. It doesn't need to be redeemable. You can just simply marry blockchain technology and gold. And I think they notice that. And you put gold at these levels, you're talking silver stratospherically high. and stocks like Dolly Varden being the opportunity of a generation with very little downside risk. Because let me ask you a question. Where was Dolly Varden's stock price when silver was $5 or $10 an ounce lower? Was it close to where it is right now? Was it higher than where it is right now? That was the question I'd be interested to know.
Well, well, first of all, Andy, I learned more in that last 10 minutes. I'm actually gonna sit my
Thank
kids
you.
down and have them listen to that, because there is you're spitting out gems, my friend. That was
Thank you.
brilliant. But to answer your question, look, I have a belief that the value that we're getting for the silver in the ground, like I had pressure when I came into Dolly. I signed up as a CEO February 2020, and there was about 40 million ounces in the ground. And people said, Sean, go mine it. You're a miner, go mine it. And I said, no. And they said, well, why not? And I said, I don't want to give it away. It was $16 an ounce. That was spot silver.
Very smart.
And they said, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I go, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to try to expand and extend it, try to find more around it. And I'm also going to buy up other deposits in the neighborhood. And so at the time, the market was giving us pennies an ounce in the ground. Today, they're giving us dollars. So what I've witnessed this little company, because silver has doubled in price. I've witnessed this little company go from a $20 million company to a $350 million company, and we're just at the beginning. And we've found more silver, we've bought more silver in the ground, and the enterprise value per ounce, the in situ value, which was 40 cents, is now $2 in the ground. And we're multiplying that by 150 million ounces in the ground. So that's where we're deriving the value. So, I really think that if we get anywhere near where we should in this market, these companies, and this is, and somebody told me this, that same guy who told me the manipulations to the upside, he said to me, the gold and silver stocks are going to be the bank stocks of the future.
Yeah, it's real
And
money. I agree.
yeah, and you know what? So the way, but as a 20-year-old kid, when I heard that 20 years ago, it took me a minute to wrap my head around that, right? Because my whole life, Andy, I never saw gold and silver as money when I was a child. It wasn't taught to me in the schools. It was only until, I too, like you, went to a conference in my early 20s and started listening to people like yourself and people like Rick Rule and Eric Sprott. And so what I thought to myself, well, if the miners are going to be the bank stocks of the future, then our deposits, our bank balance deposits, are the metal in the ground. So what I should try to do is, if this stuff is not getting fair market pricing, and we've already seen gold revalued 10 times its value. We've seen, silver from when you remembered it at $3 at 30 today. So 10x as well. But if we're only at the beginning, and if some of these issues that we have, the default or the debasement in either scenario, these metals will catch a bid. If we're only in like the first inning of this journey, then, as a miner, my goal is not to produce it and give it away for not fair market prices. It's actually to hold it back, to build it up, and to get as much of this under ownership as possible. So when the market is properly revalued, we're getting fair value for the ounces that we have, and then we start producing them. And look, this is not a new idea. Like, I look back to the Great Depression, and if you had 10% of your wealth in home stake mining,
Number one stock of the whole equity exchange. Yeah.
right? And so I look at beyond the stocks, I look at communities that were thriving communities that, today there's no one there. The unemployment is 90%, 95%. There may be 100 people in the community. These communities, whether they're in Nevada, whether they're in Northwest BC, whether they're in the mountains of the Andes, these were once thriving, bustling places where this is how the West was built, right? And I look back 400 years at who was the wealthiest man on planet Earth. He was the Emperor of China because he taxed his citizens in silver, right? And I think history repeats. And I
Right.
think that we're moving back to a time where gold and silver are going to be restored as money. And when that happens, you know, it's my goal, and I've already seen it, whether it's preserving purchasing power, being a hedge against inflation. I've already seen it. It's protected me already in my lifetime, and it's done it for years, you know, centuries. So look, I just think that, like, you know, I'm just glad that someone opened my eyes up to what's really going on. And I'm glad that I can look beyond to what's happening today, what's, you know, in the headlines today. And I thank you for really laying out that case in a way that I can understand it. And so thank you. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.